Who first whispered his name into the void before the stars learned to burn? So begins the chronicle, its vellum cracking like the bones of forgotten titans. From the depths of the librarious crypts comes the tale of Captain Titus, once a warrior of mortal proportion, now reborn into the towering mantle of Primaris Ascension. Yet the question lingers, like frost on ancient steel. Was his resurrection a gift of the Emperor's radiance, or the echo of something older, something that stirs beneath the cradle of mankind's divine rot? Across the galaxy, worlds tremble at the memory of what he once faced, for demons know the scent of the man who defied their ascendant host. And as this forbidden account flickers back into existence, scholars tremble, sensing that what was done to Titus did not end with him. It merely began with his flesh. The archives recall his fall, not as a moment of defeat, but as a wound carved into the skein of fate. Titus stood upon the Anvilus Plateau, armor shattered, purity seals burning in warp-tainted winds. His blood pooled like a crimson omen, whispering of wars unborn. When the Adeptus Astartes carried him from the battlefield, they did not know that the resonance around his dying frame made the air vibrate with something older than prophecy. Apothecaries spoke in hushed tones. His gene seed refused decay. Instead, it pulsed, slow and deliberate, as though awaiting a summons. Chaplains sensed a presence circling Hymenocene, patient, measuring. In that moment, the Imperium did not save Titus. Something allowed him to live, and the Emperor's light, for the first and last time, flickered. The Primaris project was founded on certainty Belisarius calls cold, relentless certainty that evolution could be engineered, sanctified, imprinted upon transhuman flesh. Yet when Titus' broken form entered Call's Vaultlab's machines, older than recorded history, reacted as though welcoming home a long-lost artifact. Data sigils flared unbidden. Warp-shielded monitors chimed in patterns no tech adept recognized. Call's command thralls recorded that, for a single breath, the stasis field around the captain bent inward, like space itself was bowing. Some said it was the Emperor's guiding hand. Others believed it was something else, threading its way through the lattice of genecraft. For Titus' regeneration did not follow the measured ritual used for millions of Primaris. His transformation sang with its own frequency, low, resonant, prophetic, and from deep within the vaults, a chorus of dormant constructs awakened, waiting. When Titus opened his eyes, stasis glass crystallized from the shock. Apothecaries present swore the temperature dropped by 10 degrees, frost blooming over cogitator stations, as if reality recoiled. The captain rose slowly, towering now, his form reforged into Primaris perfection. But his gaze carried something unaccounted for in the tomes of biological ascension, a memory from before his rebirth. A vision of storms swirling beyond the Materium's edge. He spoke a single phrase. The chain is incomplete. No one in the chamber understood him. Yet every mortal present felt their faith waver, as though Titus had glimpsed the architecture of existence and seen fractures running through it. The servoskulls recorded a residual echo from his voice, an energy signature that did not match any imperial source. It lingered in the air for hours, refusing to dissipate. In the days following his rise, rumors spread through the battle barges like creeping mold. Warriors who trained beside Titus reported an aura around him, faint but undeniable, a pressure that made even veteran Astartes stand straighter, as though judged. His blows shattered practice mannequins, reinforced with adamantium. His presence in the Chapel of Remembrance caused candles to gutter and extinguish. Despite the ship's sealed atmosphere, chaplains recited litanies, but the shadows behind him stretched unnaturally long, like tendrils reaching for a source no mortal dared name. Some claimed they heard whispers when Titus prayed, voices layered like strata of ancient stone, chanting in harmony with his thoughts. Others avoided him entirely, but Titus himself remained silent, as if wrestling with a truth he could not yet shape into words. The Ordo Xenos took interest first, sensing anomalies threaded through his combat records. But it was the Ordo Malleus who arrived without warning, their gunmetal gray sigils gleaming with ancient authority. Inquisitor Vathril questioned the captain beneath wards etched with runes of banishment. Titus did not resist. He spoke calmly, recounting visions that came to him during rebirth. An immense shape curled beneath the warp tides, coiling like a slumbering leviathan of thought and ruin. Vathriel's aides trembled at his description. The Inquisitor, however, leaned closer, eyes narrowing as though confirming a prophecy feared but expected. She ended the interrogation abruptly, sealing the recordings. Before departing, she whispered to Titus, "If they knew what you were becoming, they'd seal you away with the rest of them." The captain's first deployment as a Primaris was not a test-it, was a crucible. The forge moon of Erelon 12 had fallen silent, its orbit slowly decaying, as if dragged by invisible claws. The fifth company descended into metallic dusk, finding the surface shattered into spirals of melted ferrocrete. Titus moved ahead of his brothers, sensing something beneath the ruins. When the demon host emerged from fracturing reality, he did not hesitate. Witnesses later swore the air hummed around him, vibrating with a tone that made demons recoil as though struck by an invisible hammer. His blade cut arcs that left afterimages hanging like ghost fire. After the battle, no warp residue clung to Hymen, impossibility noted with growing dread. Titus himself seemed troubled, as if each victory dragged him closer to an unnamed threshold. Call confronted him next, not as a maker addressing his creation, but as a scholar seeking answers buried in the echo of older ages. He probed Titus's gene seed, expecting to confirm standard Primaris augmentations. Instead, he found deviations, subtle, elegant, impossible, structures within the helix that resisted classification, memory imprints older than Titus's life, a harmonic pattern woven through the gen code, resonating with frequencies not used in any Primaris design. Call studied it for hours before finally uttering a rare phrase. "This was not my doing." He then ordered the findings sealed, hidden from the wider Mechanicus. As Titus stood silently, Call's mechadendrites trembled. For the first time in millennia, the Archmagos considered that someone or something might be using him as a tool. Across the Imperium, Psychers began dreaming of a blue-armored giant standing on a bridge of shattered timelines. Every dream ended the same way, a single eye opening behind him, vast and luminous, watching humanity with unreadable intent. The black ships filled with terrified psychers babbling Titus's name. Astropaths reported interference patterns matching the resonance of his voice, even across light years. Oracular cults within the ecclesiarchy declared him a herald of Ascension. Others whispered that he was a harbinger of divine correction. Titus knew none of this directly, yet he felt the weight of unseen gazes pressing upon his soul, as though destiny itself had turned its focus toward him. And somewhere far away, something stirred in response. The warp reacted next. Storms bent around the systems where Titus traveled, partying like waters before a leviathan. Demons avoided his presence unless driven by higher will. Even then they approached with caution, circling him like predators, uncertain of their prey. Librarians accompanying him felt disturbances. If Titus anchored a fracture in the Imperium, stabilizing some regions while destabilizing others. One librarian, Brother Leontus, attempted a deeper reading. His mind brushed against a presence coiled around Titus's essence, and he collapsed instantly, screaming about chains in the dark and a voice with no mouth whispering to be remembered. He lived only long enough to beg Titus forgiveness. Word reached Guilliman, and the Primarch summoned Titus to the throne world. The journey was marked by Omen's silenced vox channels, unprovoked machine spirit agitation, and a ghostly ripple that passed through the Geller fields as though brushing against them from the outside. When Titus knelt before his Primarch, the Regent of Terra studied him with the gaze of one who had seen too many miracles curdle into tragedy. Guilliman sensed the anomaly immediately, though he concealed his unease. He asked Titus a single question: "Do you feel the Emperor's hand guiding you, or something else?" Titus hesitated, the first such hesitation recorded since his ascension. "I feel watched," he finally said. That night, deep within the sanctified chambers of the Imperial Palace, Titus dreamt of a place he had never seen. A vast chamber of obsidian pillars, each carved with sigils older than mankind. At its center stood a throne of broken chains, and upon it a figure draped in shadow, shapeless, yet terribly familiar. It raised its head as if hearing his breath. Something shifted in its silhouette. When Titus awoke, he found a single strand of black dust on his gauntlet, as though carried from the dream into reality. He tried to brush it away. It did not move, and somewhere beneath the palace, an ancient lock clicked softly once, then again, before falling silent. The dust upon Titus's gauntlet lingered like a sacrament of damnation, and as word of the disturbance seeped through the palace, a hush coiled through its sanctified corridors. Senior confessors whispered of an omen stripped from the edge of prophecy. Battle brothers in distant watchposts felt a sudden weight upon their spirits, as though their oaths had been rewritten without their consent. In the reclusium vaults, candles guttered in unison, their flames bending toward the east halls where the Emperor's dreamless silence brooded. The custodians felt it too ripple across the golden wards, a blemish that should not be, and beneath it all came a truth, soft as a blade, sliding through velvet. The moment Titus touched that dream, history itself inhaled, sensing a fracture too subtle to name. Across the Schola Progenium, young cadets experienced shared nightmares, visions of a giant in cobalt armor standing before a throne of broken links. Drill abbots dismissed them as the madness of youth, but the Synod of Terra recorded every detail with trembling stylus. Among the students, a quiet terror spread. If such visions were shared, then the Emperor was not speaking to them, something else was. Chaplains assigned litanies of mental fortification, yet the nightmares only intensified. Cadets woke screaming that Titus's shadow had stretched across the stars, that it carried a weight no mortal could bear, and though none dared voice it aloud, many wondered whether the Imperium had mistaken a warning for a blessing. Far from Terra, aboard the strike cruiser Judica Ultima, veterans of the Ultramarines murmured prayers in dimly lit chambers. They trusted Titus. How could they not? He was courage incarnate, a warrior sharpened on the whetstone of countless wars. Yet something in him had changed since his ascent. A subtle delay before speaking, a flicker in the eyes like a memory surfacing from somewhere beyond time. Brother Sergeant Kekis confessed to the chaplain that standing beside Titus felt like standing beside a sealed relic whose chains had begun to loosen. The chaplain's answer trembled against his iron discipline. Faith must be held even when the object of faith begins to warp in the light. But both knew the creed rang hollow. Among the mortifactors, the omens took a darker form. Their librarians, attuned to death's thousand echoes, sensed a hunger following Titus, like the shadow of a collapsing star. They tasted it in the warp, a flavor of longing, as if some forgotten entity sought to reclaim what had been lost. Their chapter master consulted ossuary runes carved from the bones of heroes. The runes cracked, literally fractured, when brought near Titus' recorded name. Such a thing had never occurred in 10,000 years. The mortifactors attempted to warn the wider Imperium, but the Inquisition intercepted the message, sealing it beneath 10 layers of doctrinal silence. Some truths, they decreed, were too dangerous to circulate among the already trembling faithful. On Macragge whispers spread through the Basilica of the Sword. Pilgrims knelt before statues of Guilliman and murmured prayers for clarity, yet their devotions felt hollow. The ecclesiarchy sensed unrest brewing in the hearts of the laity, doubts subtle, poisonous, through hymns like mold through parchment. Confessors gathered in clandestine councils, debating whether Titus' ascension represented divine will or an aberration too profane to name. One priest collapsed mid-sermon, claiming to see a chain of light descending from the heavens, ending in a single broken link. He begged the congregation to flee. Hours later, he recanted with glassy eyes, as though someone or something had overwritten his memories. The faithful trembled beneath their relics. High above Terra's lower wards, an assassin of the Officio Assassinorum observed Titus from a vantage cloaked in shadows. She had been given no kill order, only a directive: watch and record deviations. Yet even she, trained to feel nothing, felt a stirring unease. Titus' movements bore a strange rhythm, as though he listened to a chorus inaudible to others. His presence caused distortion in her Uspex feeds, ripples like gravity wells forming around him. She considered sending an encrypted query to her superiors, but something in the Aaron instinct, honed through a lifetime of sanctioned murder, warned her to remain silent. Silence, she realized, was no longer merely caution. It was survival. Within the Inquisition's shadow-bound conclaves, debates erupted with venomous urgency. Vathril argued that Titus represented a divergency mutation, unbidden by the Emperor's will. Others insisted he was a herald of divine metamorphosis. The Ordo Hereticus accused the Ordo Malleus of withholding evidence. The Malleus retorted with accusations of doctrinal cowardice. At the heart of their discord lay a single question: if Titus had been touched by something beyond imperial comprehension, how could they contain it without tearing apart the fragile unity of faith? Their arguments spiraled into whispered threats, codes rewritten, and loyalties repositioned in darkness. The Imperium had not feared a single Astartes in millennia, but they feared the truth he embodied. On the front lines of the Sharadan Rift, a regiment of Astra Militarum knelt in the mud, watching Titus enter the fray. They saw him wreathed in an aura that bent the smoke around him. Demons recoiled before he struck. Some turned to ash before his blade even touched them. Soldiers gasped prayers, but behind those prayers hid terror. If a single warrior could unmake horrors with mere proximity, what did that say about the nature of his soul? A sergeant muttered that perhaps the Emperor had sent a new kind of angel. His comrade replied, Or perhaps we are seeing the birth of a god. Both fell silent afterward, realizing such words could merit execution or worse. The Mechanicus, obsessed with patterns, attempted to chart Titus anomalies. Their cogitators malfunctioned. Their data streams looped into impossible spirals. One Magos declared the disruptions resembled an intelligence observing their observations and Ouroboros of scrutiny. He theorized a hidden algorithm embedded in reality itself, reacting to Titus's presence. When he shared this with a fabricator general, he was found hours later in a stasis cell, mind wiped clean. His final words were recorded only in fragmented bursts. It is learning through him, or remembering through him. The Mechanicus tightened its grip on the information, even as its adepts began hearing metallic whispers in their dreams. In the catacombs beneath the palace, the Custodes gathered in silent conclave. They had stood vigil through the rise and fall of empires, but this disturbance felt different closer. A shadow flickered across the golden wards, forming a shape that resembled Titus' silhouette before dissolving like smoldering incense. The Captain General declared that the time for passive observation was nearing its end. If he is a herald of change, he stated softly, then change has already infiltrated the palace. The custodians exchanged glances not of fear, but of solemn readiness, titans of gold, preparing for a truth that could unmake the Imperium they existed to preserve. On the eve of a new campaign, Guilliman summoned Titus once more, this time not as a commander, but as a man burdened by impossibility. The Primarch searched for answers in Titus' gaze and found only a silent Pleias, though Titus himself feared what he was becoming. Guilliman confessed that he felt a presence circling the Imperium, tightening like a noose woven from prophecy and rebellion. "If you are its conduit," he said, "then I must know if you stand with Usur, with whatever watches you." Titus tried to reply, but the words curdled on his tongue, swallowed by a force that refused articulation. And then came the moment that shattered certainty. In the middle of their exchange, the lights of the sanctum dimmed not, mechanically, but as though an unseen hand had drawn breath. The walls trembled. A soft clink echoed at Guilliman's feet. He looked down. A single broken chain link lay upon the marble, forged of no metal known to Terra. Titus stared at it in horror, as though seeing a memory he had never lived. Guilliman reached for it. The link moved. In the heartbeat, after the chain link stirred, Guilliman froze not in fear, but in recognition of something older than the Imperium, older even than the first screams of old night. Titus felt the chamber constrict around him, air thickening like coagulating blood. The link shuddered once more and dissolved into motes of black luminescence, each drifting as though searching for a host. One settled on Titus Fambris. Another hovered before Guilliman's eyes like a question he had never wished to face. And in that suffocating stillness, both warriors felt a third presence, neither demon nor divine, pressing against the membrane of reality, watching through the cracks that Titus had never meant to open. Word of the disturbance leaked through the palace like a bruise blooming beneath skin. Custodians found themselves praying something they had not done in millennia, for they had never needed the comfort of faith. Tech priests discovered their machine spirits whispering warnings in Binharic tones, too distressed to decipher. Amid this dread, a single custodian confessed to his shield captain that he dreamed of kneeling before Titus, not Guilliman, as though the order of reverence had inverted itself. His shame burned, yet he could not unsee it. The captain had no reprimand. He, too, had dreamed the same. Such confessions spread quietly, like heresy clothed in gold. Across the segmentum solar, the Astra Militarum fought in the corpse fields of Vortua Ix, a world drowned in the shadows of an awakening warp storm. Guardsmen huddled in trenches carved through ash and shattered statues of saints, clinging to litanies that tasted increasingly hollow. One young trooper recited the litany of binding while staring at the sky's unnatural glow. "If the Emperor watches," he whispered, voice trembling, "why do I feel another gaze above his?" His sergeant struck him for the blasphemy, but the blow lacked conviction. For the sergeant himself had begun to dream of a towering figure in cobalt armor, haloed not by light, but by a corona of broken chains, drifting like dead stars. The chaplains of the Ultramarines convened in their reclusium aboard the Athena Victus, seeking solace in ancient scripture. They spoke of faith as a fortress, unyielding and eternal, but scripture twisted strangely in their hands. Verses, long committed to memory, appeared subtly altered. Sigils, once sharp, now curved into serpentine shapes, as though rewritten by an unseen editor. The youngest chaplain, earnest and untested, confessed that every time he prayed, he felt a second presence kneeling beside him, silent, inquisitive, learning. The senior chaplains dismissed him with stern resolve, yet when he departed, they exchanged glances carved from fear, for each of them had felt the same. On the world of Mur's fall, psychers collapsed simultaneously during a routine communion. Their screams formed a single word: remember. Astropaths bled from their eyes, insisting the whisper came not from the warp, but from a place deeper, more coherent, more ancient. One, moments before death, drew a sigil in her own blood, an incomplete chain with 9 links, one broken, one missing, one inverted. Transmission of the drawing was suppressed, sealed under inquisitorial mandate, yet the symbol spread regardless, birthed in the dreams of thousands, like a contagion of meaning. Each dreamer awoke with the sensation of being examined. The Mechanicus, ever hungry for patterns, attempted again to chart the resonance surrounding Titus, using newspheric probes forbidden in 3 forge worlds. They detected a harmonic pulse emanating from him, one that matched readings taken only once before. 10,000 years passed during the moment of the Emperor's internment upon the Golden Throne. The data nearly triggered a schism. Some magi claimed the signature proved Titus was touched by the Emperor's evolving will. Others argued the opposite, that something parallel to the Emperor's power had risen, camouflaged in familiar patterns. Sects fractured, temples argued, and prayers to the Omnissiah faltered mid-chant. In the quiet between machine chants, an echo reverberated, a slow, patient pulse. Amid this rising chaos, Titus himself unraveled in silence. He prayed alone in a chamber of black marble aboard the indomitable Resolve, seeking clarity, seeking the Emperor's voice. Instead, he heard memory, not his own. He saw a battlefield before humanity learned to speak fire. He saw titans of bone and starlight forging chains to bind something that screamed in every language at once. He felt those chains shatter. He felt a fragment embed itself in the essence that would one day become him. When he awoke, he found tears on his face, the first he had shed since his ascension, and even those felt borrowed. Gilliman summoned the High Lords, demanding unity amid the rising storms. Instead, he found discord sharpening into blades. Some declared Titus a weapon forged by the Emperor for the Imperium's next evolution. Others whispered he was a Trojan seed, a vessel for a forgotten entity wearing humanity's reflection. The fabricator general argued their own archives hinted at precursors to the Primaris process experiments from the dark age of technology, involving ancestral echoes meant to anchor consciousnesses older than mankind. Guilliman refuted them with fire in his voice, yet doubt clung to him like frost. In the hall's recesses, a robed lord muttered, "Perhaps we are no longer shepherding the Emperor's plan. Perhaps his plan has been hijacked." On Baal, sanguinary priests felt their red thirst diminish when contemplating Titus. At first they rejoiced, believing his presence a blessing. But soon they realized the thirst had not been quenched, had fled, recoiling from something it sensed within him. The priests gathered in a blood-lit chapel and scried visions within crimson pools. They saw chains coiled around a great sphere of light, each link inscribed with a language that predated psionics. One link pulsed in time with Titus's heartbeat, another with the movement of distant warp currents, a third with the Emperor's lingering psychic shadow. The priests fell to their knees, muttering the same phrase, "One chain is not of him." Aboard the Judica Ultima, Cecus approached Titus privately, unable to endure the weight of unspoken fear. He confessed that brothers had begun dreaming of kneeling to Titus, as if he were a saint or a god. He begged his captain for truth. Titus offered none. Instead, the air thickened around him, trembling with restrained potential. Cecus swore he saw a halo flicker behind Titus, made not of light, but of silhouettes resembling broken manacles. He fled the chamber in terror, leaving Titus alone with a realization he had long resisted. Something within him was waking. Then came the event that twisted the galaxy's fate irrevocably. During a warp translation, the indomitable resolve plunged through a psychic vortex. Every soul aboard felt a mind-vast, ancient, and intimately familiar brush against their thoughts. Titus alone heard it speak. The voice did not sound alien. It sounded like him, a version of him older than the Imperium, older than humanity, whispering through the cracks of eternity. When the ship exited the warp, Titus's reflection was no longer his own. It stared back with eyes shaped like eclipsed suns and whispered, "I remember what we were before the first chain broke." And in that instant, the galaxy shifted. The reflection that stared back from the fractured lumen glass aboard the indomitable resolve haunted Titus long after the vortex's psychic roar faded into suffocating quiet. Those eclipse-shaped eyes did not judge him. They recognized him, welcomed him, claimed him. The crew moved in fearful silence, avoiding his gaze even when duty demanded proximity. In the echoing corridors, mortals whispered that the captain had carried something out of the warp, something that wore his armor like a reliquary. Titus walked among them heavy with dread, each breath a penance. He felt the Emperor's distant warmth retreat a fraction, as though reluctant to witness what he was becoming. Yet he marched onward, bound by duty so deeply carved into his bones that even the encroaching shadow could not unmake it. On Terra, Guilliman stood alone before the Eternity Gate, feeling the galaxy tilt around a truth he could not yet speak aloud. He sensed Titus' transformation like a pressure behind his ribs, a tide steadily rising. He prayed not for deliverance, but for clarity, and found only a hollow ache. He remembered the Great Crusade, the idealism that once defined him, and tasted bitterness. How many times had the Imperium survived only through compromise and hidden sins? What did loyalty mean now, when its object seemed fracturing? As the Emperor's throne flared with a brief, pained pulse of light, Guilliman whispered an oath older than the darkening age around him. I will not abandon humanity, even if humanity abandons its gods. In the Schola Progenium, the nightmares intensified. Children dreamt of battles fought in impossible ages, planets cracking beneath chains of star-forged metal. One girl awoke, screaming that she had stood beside Titus before the first sun was lit. When interrogated, she recited phrases in a language no lex mechanic could place. Her caretaker, driven to trembling, wrote a confession. The children are remembering things they never lived. Doubt infiltrated every lesson, every creed. Drill abbots muttered prayers over trembling hands. One broke down mid-sermon, sobbing, "How do we teach devotion to a truth that shifts beneath our feet?" None answered. The silence felt like the first breath of a long-buried god stirring. Among the Ultramarines, faith strained against the weight of revelation. Kekis watched his brothers sharpen their blades, performing rituals with hands unsure, eyes hollowed by sleepless uncertainty. They spoke of Titus in hushed tones, reverence warring with fear. One veteran admitted he prayed the captain was merely cursed. Curses could be lifted, after all. But when asked what he feared the alternative might be, he only whispered that he is chosen. For the first time in centuries, warriors forged to die without hesitation hesitated over their own prayers. The chaplains thundered sermons of unity, but their voices cracked, their certainty bruised. The chapter felt like a fortress whose foundations had begun to hum with subterranean tremors. The Mechanicus found itself divided along lines not seen since the schism of Mars. Half-proclaimed Titus, a sign of convergence and algorithm of destiny aligning fragments of lost epochs. The others decreed him a herald of recursive corruption. Forge worlds bled data wars into the noosphere, entire sects rewriting scripture in real time. Among the ruins of Canterfor, Amagos uncovered a hex pattern identical to the resonance surrounding Titus etched into a machine core predating the Imperium. He transmitted a final, terrified message. We did not build this, we remembered it. Then the core consumed him in a flare of impossible geometry. His colleagues fell into frantic silence. The Omnissiah's truth felt suddenly too large for their steel-bound minds. In the catacombs beneath Terra, the custodians walked in heavy steps, their golden armor dimmed by something they could not name. One knelt before a mural depicting the Emperor's triumph over a hooded figure bound in chains. He realized for the first time that the mural's face had been deliberately chiseled away. A forgotten battle, a forgotten foe, a forgotten truth. As the custodian traced the broken chains with gloved fingers, he felt a shudder run through the stone, as if memory itself recoiled from being touched. He whispered a forbidden thought. If we erased a god to build an empire, then what happens when that god returns? No one answered. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Across the stars, the faithful felt their devotion curdling into grief. Priests recited litanies over altars that trembled with unseen pressure. Some found their prayers turning to ash in their mouths. Others heard distant hymns harmonizing with their own, melodies that reverberated like echoes from forgotten eras. A confessor on Armageddon admitted to his congregation that he no longer recognized the Emperor's silence. It felt different now, deeper, almost contemplative. The faithful wept. Some clung harder to doctrine. Others stared at statues of saints and felt only a cavernous hunger where certainty once lived. Doubt became a quiet plague, spreading through hearts armored by centuries of dogma. Titus himself wandered the observation decks of the indomitable Resolve, watched by serfs too terrified to approach. Below him sprawled a field of stars, each twinkling like a dying ember. His reflection in the void glass flickered. Sometimes his eyes were his own, sometimes eclipses, sometimes something older. He felt the presence inside him pulsing, testing the edges of his form, searching for the cracks through which it had first whispered. It did not feel hostile. That frightened him most. It felt familiar. It felt like the echo of a promise made before mankind learned to fear the dark. He clutched the aquila on his chest plate, unsure whether it still recognized him. On Baal, the sanguinary priests gathered beneath blood-red moons. Their visions grew violent, chains snapping across the sky, worlds drowning in shadow, and at the center of it all, Titus, standing like a fulcrum between annihilation and rebirth. They debated whether to warn Gilliman or purge themselves for what they had seen. One elder whispered that perhaps the Red Angel had not been their only ancient burden. The Emperor sealed many horrors, he said softly. Not all of them were foes. The younger priests recoiled. The elder sighed. We fear the wrong things. And when the blood pools whispered back to him, he felt a truth that chilled his marrow. Titus is not possessed. He is remembering. The Inquisition fractured along invisible seams. Vathril argued for containment. Others argued for alliance. Some believed Titus the key to an era beyond human suffering, a bridge to power the Imperium could no longer afford to ignore. A splinter faction whispered an older theory that the Emperor himself had once fought a rival, not of chaos, but of creation, and bound its essence across the stars in fragments. If true, one such fragment now stirred within Titus. A radical inquisitor spoke the unthinkable. Perhaps the Emperor chained something that should never have been chained. The room fell silent, eyes narrowed. Hands drifted toward holsters. The meeting adjourned with no verdict. Shadows left deeper than before. Cacus finally confronted Titus again, trembling not with fear for his life, but fear for his soul. Brother, he whispered, tell me this is not the end of us. Titus looked at him, struggling to form an answer that would not break them both. He opened his mouth, but the presence inside him surged. His voice deepened, layered, echoing with a timbre that rattled the bulkheads. We have ended before. We begin again. Cacus stumbled back, terror hollowing his bones. Titus slammed a gauntlet to the wall, fighting for control. Sparks danced. The ship groaned. I am still your captain, he gasped. But even he doubted it. And then, on a nameless world, consumed by warp storm and shadowed history, Titus collapsed to one knee as a seismic pulse tore through his mind. He saw truly the origin of the chains, not bindings of imprisonment, but bindings of union, crafted to unite two cosmic wills into one impossible whole. The Emperor had rejected the merging, the other had not. Humanity was built on the fracture that followed. As this revelation thundered through him, armor split along glowing seams. A second heartbeat awakened beneath his own. Titus, rose changed, illuminated by memory older than mankind, and whispered a name that had not been spoken since before the first star ignited. The galaxy shuddered, waiting for the echo. From the smoldering horizon of Part 4, the tale surges into its final crucible, where ruin and revelation spiral together like twin serpents choking the last breath from hope. In the wake of the sundered vaults, as celestial dust drifts like the ashes of forgotten martyrs, the Imperium's scattered legions feel the warp twitch with anticipation, a predator's inhale before the strike. Across a ravaged plateau of burning reliquaries, Captain Titus stands beneath fissured heavens, his Primaris form haloed by the bleeding light of a dying sun. Every oath he has ever spoken tastes of copper and regret. Around him, the ground trembles with the march of corrupted titans. Engines once blessed, now twisted by heresy into war shrines of screaming metal. Servitors utter glitching psalms that distort into pleas, and even the chaplains falter as they sense the Emperor's radiance, dim beneath the weight of an unseen verdict. Yet the battle erupts before hesitation can claim them. A thunderous collision of flesh, ceramite, and ideological fury. Bolts ignite the dusk. Plasma fire turns prayer into vapor. Titus cleaves through traitors with a speed that defies the memory of his former death. Every movement guided by something deeper than instinct, something older than the gene seed pulsing in his reforged veins. But as he slaughters, a strange resonance vibrates through his armor, as though a choir buried within the metal is screaming without sound. His brothers do not hear it. Only he hears it. Only he suffers its message. And with each corpse that falls before him, the resonance grows clearer, forming syllables etched in agony. The librarians sense it before he speaks. Their helms snap toward Titus, their psychic hoods flaring like dying candles in a gale. The warp wails through them, bending their spines, splitting their voices into layered tones that echo truths not meant for mortal minds. They see something festering inside the Primaris Ascension, something grafted into Titus, not by accident, but by decree. In their terror, they reach for him, not to aid, but to restrain, and the battlefield trembles as the captain casts them aside, unwilling to become a specimen dissected in the middle of war. But their fear stains the air. The other Ultramarines hesitate. Doubt slashes deeper than any heretic blade. For the first time, they see Titus not as a resurrected hero, but as an unanswered question. And in that hesitation, the traitor warlord strikes. A monstrous figure clad in armor, fused with tortured daemon flesh, its maw leaking fire and prophecy, charges through the ruin storm. Its axe hums with carved souls. Its shadow stretches like an omen of extinction. Titus meets the blow with both hands on his sword, the clash erupting in a shockwave that crushes rubble into dust and flings space marines like broken icons across the field. Time fractures under the weight of their battle, each strike carrying memories of wars long lost, each parry echoing futures that may never come to pass. The warlord roars, a truth Titus is not ready to hear, a truth the battlefield tries to swallow with violence before it can take form. As they struggle, visions spill from the warp like blood from an open wound. Titus sees himself upon a throne, not built for mortals, his face half luminous, half ravaged by shadow. He sees Guilliman kneeling, not in reverence, but in mourning. He sees the Emperor's silent form stirring at last, not in salvation, but in judgment. These images stagger him, rupturing his grip, and the warlord buries its axe into his shoulder, cracking ceramite and bone in a single devastating strike. Titus falls to one knee. The resonance returns, no longer whispering, but singing, a terrible harmony that pulses with purpose. The traitor warlord leans close, voice dripping corruption and revelation. You were not remade by your masters. You were repurposed. The words cling like frost. The librarians cry out, demanding he deny the claim, but Titus feels the weight in his very gene-forged marrow. Something in his Primaris rebirth does not belong to the Emperor's design. Something watches through him, something chooses through him, and it awakens. A psychic detonation erupts from Titus, unbidden, uncontrolled. The warp buckles. The warlord is hurled back, armor cracking into molten shards. Space Marines collapse, bleeding from eyes and ears, as the very air screams. Titus rises with steps that shake the ground, his eyes burning with a dual light, one cerulean, one an impossible shade of gold. His sword lifts as if guided by invisible hands. With a single, world-splitting swing, he cleaves the warlord in two, the corpse dissolving into ash before it touches the ground. Silence falls like dust after bombardment. The Ultramarines gather, their expressions torn between awe and dread. The librarians whisper of impossible signatures in the warp flare, signatures to ancient, to intimate, to be anything but forbidden. Titus stands trembling, unable to reconcile the power that poured through him with the faith he has clung to since his first breath as a son of Ultramar. He looks to the heavens, but the Emperor's light does not answer. It watches, it waits, and he realizes with bone-deep horror that he was not alone in that final strike. Something had helped him. Something had chosen him. As the smoke thins and the sun dies behind fractured spires, a lone servo-skull drifts from the rubble, its data feeds crackling with encrypted sigils. A final message reassembles in broken bursts of static, projected against the shattered sky. The voice is unmistakable, a Primaris, but twisted, uncertain, maybe grieving. It speaks a name Titus should not bear, and before the recording collapses into corruption, its final words rupture the battlefield's fragile calm. You were never meant to return. From the dying resonance of the Primaris' fractured message, the battlefield settles into a sorrow so deep it feels older than language. Smoke drifts across broken earth like tattered veils pulled from mourning statues, and the last echoes of bolter fire fade into a silence that seems almost reverent. Titus stands alone among the ruin, his armor cracked, his breathing ragged, his soul pulled between two impossible truths. Around him, the Ultramarines gather in uncertain orbit, unwilling to draw closer, unwilling to retreat. The captain's silhouette trembles beneath the last embers of a collapsing sun, as if some unseen hand were slowly erasing him from the age that birthed him. Even the wind seems hesitant to touch him, as though it fears what secrets might answer if it dares whisper. In the aftermath, the apothecaries move through the dead with measured ritual, sealing helms with quiet respect, placing purity seals upon fallen brothers whose valor will never be contested, yet whose faith may now be stained by proximity to Titus's awakening. Each corpse becomes a question, each broken blade a warning, and among them a remembrancer, one who survived by accident rather than design moves with trembling steps, capturing the final remnants of light, as if chronicling the death of certainty itself. Their lens flickers when it focuses on Titus, unable to reconcile the man with the revelation that clings to him like a persistent shadow. They lower the device at last, unable to record what the Emperor himself may not wish remembered. Far from the battlefield's heart, the chaplains kneel in a cracked cathedral of stone and ash, reciting litanies meant to anchor the soul in devotion. But their voices falter, their prayers sound thin, uncertain. The black-armored priests glance toward Titus in the distance, and for the first time in their lives, their faith trembles beneath the weight of an unanswerable possibility. What if righteousness can be forged with hands that tremble? What if destiny is not a path, but a cage? They press their rosarius to their foreheads, as though hoping to feel the Emperor's warmth within the cold metal. Yet all they sense is the fading echo of old certainties slipping through their fingers like sand. As the sky darkens, the remnants of the enemy forces retreat into warped, tainted twilight, refusing to press their advantage as though shaken by a truth they glimpsed in Titus's strike. They flee not from defeat, but from revelation. Demon engines shudder and turn away, their baleful hearts quenching as if fearful of a rival power stirring. Their departure leaves an eerie stillness across the plains, and the Ultramarines watch them go with a dread deeper than any battlefield wound. Victory feels hollow, almost profane. None dare voice the thought, but all feel it in their marrow. They have not won, merely survived something they cannot name. Titus moves at last, slow and unsteady, toward the ruins of a once great basilica. Its pillars lie shattered like the bones of forgotten titans, and its stained glass saints lie fractured across the floor, their colors fading beneath ash. He steps inside, as if entering a tomb carved for him alone. With each footfall, memories pierce him, oaths sworn, brothers lost. The moment of his rebirth that no longer feels like salvation, but a rewriting. He lays his hand upon a fallen statue of Guilliman, tracing the cracks that split the Primarch's serene face. In the reflection of the broken marble, he sees both of his eyes, one blue, one golden, and realizes the fracture is his own. Behind him, the librarians approach with caution, their psychic hoods dimmed. They speak to him as one might speak to a wounded star, their words soft, weighted. They confess what they sensed in his surge of power, an echo of something that predates the Imperium itself. A presence neither wholly divine nor wholly damned. They ask him if he felt it too. Titus does not answer. His silence is confirmation enough. The librarians withdraw, shaken, whispering warnings to one another like acolytes murmuring in a forbidden archive. They fear what the truth may demand of them. They fear more what denying it might cost. Night descends. Voxhails crackle with fragmented orders from distant command, but the Ultramarines scarcely respond. Their focus remains on the captain, who stands unmoving before a broken altar, his shadow stretched long across the rubble. A young battle brother dares approach, placing a gauntleted hand upon Titus's pauldron, offering loyalty instead of judgment. Titus turns, meeting the warrior's gaze with a heaviness that nearly breaks him. "I do not know what I am," he admits. The words drift through the ruins like a confession carried by spectral winds. The battle brother bows his head, whispering, "Then we will walk with you until you do." But Titus knows the universe rarely grants such mercy. In the deep hours before dawn, the Remembrancer records the battlefield from afar, capturing not the glory of war, but the quiet ache left in its wake. Banners hang limp. The dead lie wrapped in ceramite and reverence. The surviving Ultramarines stand vigil beneath shattered spires, silent guardians of a truth they dare not utter. The Remembrancer zooms in on Titus's distant figure, alone against a horizon as empty as an unspoken prayer. Something in that loneliness feels sacred. Something in it feels doomed. And as the camera lens quivers, the warp stirs against soft, subtle, like a whisper brushing the edge of reality. A faint golden glow flickers around Titus's form, not enough to illuminate, yet enough to unsettle. The Ultramarines sense it too. None speak, none move, for in that glow lies a suggestion that the Emperor's will may be shifting, or that something else entirely has laid claim to their captain's soul. The dawn finally breaks, pale, wounded light struggling through ash-choked clouds. Titus steps from the basilica, the golden flicker gone, but the echo of it lingering in the eyes of every witness. He knows the path ahead may lead to exile, to revelation, or to a death written in ancient scripts never meant for mortal comprehension. But for now, he walks among his brothers, each footfall a vow to endure the judgment that awaits him. The wind carries the faint scent of incense and scorched earth, weaving questions through the air. What is the price of survival when survival reshapes the soul? And what becomes of faith when its foundations tremble beneath unanswerable truth? The Remembrancer's chronicle ends, as all chronicles must, with silence, with uncertainty, with the understanding that even a legend can bleed beneath the weight of destiny. Their final entry fades with a soft whisper, a plea carried across starless nights. If this tale has stirred your spirit, if these shadows demand witness, then lend your voice. Like, subscribe, share, and let your thoughts be carved among the comments, that this chronicle may endure beyond the fall of empires.